Hello, this is Alex with CursusDB, and today we're going to be going over how to deploy a CursusDB database, cluster, and node, and we'll make a node replica as well securely on Google Cloud services using Compute Engine. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is, as you can see, I'm on Google Cloud here. I don't have any instances here. Or I'm on IP addresses here, so let me go under VM instances. All right, so VM instances. What are we going to do first here? So we're going to create a instance for a cluster. We're going to create an instance for a node, and we're going to create an instance for a node replica of node 0. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to keep these instances pretty small for this example. But yeah, so let's do CursusDB cluster 0. Okay. And by the way, we're going to be adding a FQDN and TLS to this as well. So yeah, just letting you guys know that. So what we'll do is we'll have a, for the cluster, I guess we can have an E2 medium here. So CursusDB cluster 0. Now, and we'll change the boot disk here to be, we'll just leave it at 10 gigabytes, and we'll change this to be Ubuntu. And we'll pick 23.04, and we'll just select that. Okay. Now, before we complete this instance, what we have to do here is we actually have to create a firewall rule, because the cluster, right, which is called the Cursus, needs to be in Ingress have a port 7681 enabled, and we also need 7682 for our nodes, right? So let's do that. Let's duplicate this tab. Let's go here and let's write, let's see, firewall. Okay. We'll go to VPC network, which is virtual private network, okay, or virtual private cloud, sorry. And so what we'll do here is we'll go to create firewall. Oh, sorry, I meant create firewall rule. So we'll click that. And what we'll do is we'll call this CursusDB. And we'll leave it in the default network. We'll make it a priority of 10. All right, we'll set Ingress. And let me see here. So we'll do specific tags. So we'll say CursusDB is the tag for this firewall rule. And for source IPv4 ranges, for this example, we're just going to keep it at 0.00, right, to reach the cluster. But normally don't do this. All right, normally don't do this. Restrict it to like where you're going to be using your cluster. So, you know, I'll give you another example what you can do here. So you can say, what's my IP? Okay. And you can grab your IP address here. And what you can do is instead of saying all, you can say your IP address. Okay. And like this, you're only reaching your cluster and only able to reach your cluster through your IP address. So that's a better example than the 0.0.0.0 because that's going to enable anybody to reach your cluster, okay, which you don't want. So with that, what we're going to do is TCP, and we're going to type, we already have it there, so 7681, 7682. Okay, so we're all good there. We have our target tags. We have ingress, we have default, we have a priority, and we have the name of our firewall rule. And we can even say that this is the CursusDB cluster and node ingress firewall rules. Ingress TCP firewall rules. Okay. Awesome. Let's create that. Let's go. So now we have a firewall rule. So now with our firewall rule, what we'll do is we'll just go over here and we'll go under advanced options, networking. Now, there's another piece we're going to have to do here. We're going to duplicate this tab again, and we're going to go under IP addresses. Now, we don't have any IP addresses, right, for this cluster. And now the reason we need a static IP address, external static public IP address, is because we're going to be tying it to an FQDN, okay? Now, this is important. So you want to follow along for this part. It's pretty important, okay? So now, network tags, we're going to put CursusDB. and leave the host name. Now, over here, network interfaces. We're going to go over here under external IPv address, and we're going to go reserve static external IP address. Okay. Now, before I do this, though, let me just check what I named this node, this cluster. So CursusDB cluster 0. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll go back down there and I'll say reserve static external IP address. I'll say that this is the CursusDB cluster 0 external static IP. Okay. Awesome. CursusDB cluster 0 external static IP. Reserve. So we'll reserve that. Okay. Wait for that to finish up. Awesome. So now, before we jump out and finish with our instance, we also want to enable HTTP and allow HTTPS traffic. The reason for this is because when we're using certbot to say give us a cert, we need HTTP and HTTPS enabled. Okay. So let's see here, and looks like we're okay to finish off the cluster here. Default. Looks good. Create. Now, we have the cluster created while it's loading, and I'm going to show you how I'll create the node and node replica instances faster instead of going through that whole same thing that we did there. It's pretty similar to set up the two other instances that we're going to set up, so no problem there. Let's go and click that, and we'll just create similar here. And we're going to call this CursusDB node 0. Okay, so this is the node 0. And so we'll see the E2 medium. Let's say Ubuntu, perfect. The device name is wrong for some reason. I don't know why the device name is showing that. I don't know if that's a glitch, Google Cloud. You see that? Okay, so we have that, advanced options, networking. I'm just gonna put this in there because interesting. What does it have there as a default? Okay, so I'm not gonna go with what that device name says. I'm not sure why it's showing that there, but that's not the name. So, okay, so with that, what we're also going to do is with the node, okay, so mind you, we're in a virtual private cloud, okay, so we don't have to essentially create another public, external IPv4 address. We can create, an internal IPv4 address and reach the node internally, and that's what we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to say reserve a static internal IPv4 address, and we're going to say that this is the CursusDB node 0 internal internal IP, internal static IP. Okay, so now we have our internal static IP for the node 0, and that all looks good. We have our network tags, and we can go done. That all looks good. Yep, looks good. So we'll create that. And now we're going to create one more node here as a node replica to node 0. Okay. I'll just give it a second. So the reason we're going to create a replica here is in case node 0 is unavailable, the replica, because it has sync data, and we're going to synchronize, we'll set up a sync between the node and the node replica. We'll have synchronized data, so if node 0 is ever unavailable, it'll rely on the replica, okay? And depending on how fast you sync your data, you know what I mean? It should be pretty up to date. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what if it's a minute delay and we have that there was records on node 0 that didn't get synchronized out to the replica or something like this? Well, in this case, right, you need to have multiple nodes because, you know, if you're doing inserts, especially inserts, right? The cluster will look for any available node, right? So you can set up multiple nodes. But for this example, I'm just giving you the one node and the one replica. But you can add another node and another node replica and another node and another node replica, and a node can have multiple replicas, right? Okay, so let's go click this here, the node 0, and we're gonna create another similar here, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna call this node 0 replica 0. Okay, and then what we'll do, everything's pretty similar here, standard steps, go under networking, CursusDB, and then we'll go default, and then we'll pick an internal, reserve internal static, and we'll say replica 0, static, internal. I'm just kind of curious what I named the other one, so it's similar. It's loading. Internal static IP is what I did. Internal, node replica 0. Awesome. Reserve. Just going. Done. Okay. So now we have 3 instances here. Okay, so that's great, and we're really set up to go now. All right, so we have one public, well, one that we're going to set up with TLS here, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. And the cluster is going to be connected to this node and this node replica essentially. Okay, so let's SSH into the cluster. And then we're going to SSH into the node and the node replica and get those started and the services started on them. Just starting up here. Authorized. Okay, SSH in there. Sorry, I'm just SSHing into all these instances here. Okay, so there, node 0. So now we have a few there. So the first things we're going to set up are the node and the node replica. Okay, so we're going to set these up. So let's go to CursusDB, and I have the GitHub here, and I have the documentation here. Okay, so I like to just follow along with the documentation. It's so easy to follow. So I'm just going to go ahead and get the cluster node here, wget, and find node 0 here. And before I wget this, I'm gonna go and do a sudo make dir opt CursusDB, and then I'm gonna cd in that directory. Okay. Got my phone on. There we go. We got nothing in there. We got that. Oh, obviously permission denied. Obviously. Sudo. Gonna extract what we did there. So node 0, right? So sudo extract. So now we have our code there. So what I'm going to do here is just start it up and just get the initial configuration file, crowd config. So start it up, enter my key. Okay, so now the node has a crowd config. So now I'll just do a sudo nano crowd config. So this is our crowd config, and as you can see, we have no replica set up on the node on the main node, right? So let's set up a replica here. We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll do host. And we'll go over here and we'll find the internal for that replica, which is this one right here. So we'll copy that internal IP address. We'll go over here. I'll paste that. We'll say that the port is 7682, which is the default for a node. Okay, let me see here. What do we want to do here? So because this is going to be a service, I like to just enable logging. Replication sync time. For this example, we'll do like every 2 minutes. Replication sync timeout. 10 minutes is pretty good. Automatic backups. Now, I always recommend to have automatic backups, and especially in production. So I'm just gonna enable that, right? So I'll show you how that works. Enable automatic backup time. This is in minutes, so I'll just say, okay, every let's say 4 minutes, give me a backup, and let's say every hour, clean up what is older than an hour, and we'll just say automatic backups is true. Local time zone. And yeah, we'll just leave it the regular backups directory there, and we'll save that. Okay. Now, in the GitHub directory under node, you'll find systemd instructions. Okay, and you can just usually just copy what's inside the CRUD service. So that's what I like to do. I just like to copy what's inside the service here, right? And I like to go over here. And I like this just, to give it a sudo nano etc system d system crud.service sudo nano etc system d system service. Awesome. Paste that. And as you can see, it's going in the op directory that we created for CursusDB, and it's executing CRUD. And yeah, it'll on. So yeah, we're going to enable it. So on shutdown or restart, it'll turn on the node for us there. So the way we have our node set up right now is we have automatic backups, we have automatic replication, okay, and it's secure. So great, and we have a service set up. So well, we don't have it set up just yet, right? We have to do this reload here. We'll do the daemon reload. Okay, so now it catches our CRUD service here, and then we'll just start our service up. Pretty basic stuff, right? So start that up, and then we'll just do a status here. And as you can see, our cluster node is running, and so we're going to have to actually shut this down because we're going to have to start our replica before we start our node, okay? So we'll just stop this, and I'll also show you the logging here in a second. So we'll stop it, okay? And what we'll also do is also just enable it. So as I said, on restart or whatever, it'll start the node, okay? So we'll enable it. As you can see, it created the symlink. Now, in this directory, right, you won't be able to see it. Mind you, you have to do an LSA. So LSA, you have a CDAT, you have a CRUD config, you have a the KQ here. Now, you might be the QQ here file. You might be wondering, okay, what is that? Well, what that is if your node has a lot of transactions, and let's say it's updating one document, and it has a queue of transactions to update that one document because of a locked mutex. Well, and then all of a sudden the power goes out, that Q file is gonna essentially have encrypted, right? But it's gonna have all your backed up query log, right? So your transaction log. Yeah. So what I want to show you is just tail crud.log. As you can see here, we had the 112 collection mutex is created, and as you can see, it loaded nothing from the queue. Transaction queue, and then we stopped it, right? We sent it a signal and we stopped it through systemd. We started, and essentially we restarted it. And because we restarted it and we stopped it, right? We have this write to file, and every time on shutdown, it'll write the node's data to that CDAT that you see here, right? And if we nano inside that CDAT, it's there. We don't have any data, but it's encrypted, right? Okay, so cool. Now, before we start our main node, we're going to create our replica here. So legit, it's the same steps, the same exact thing that we just did. All we're going to do is do it on the replica, right? So we're going to do a sudo mkdir opt CursusDB, and then we'll cd inside there, ls, and again, just go back to the documentation, get the cluster node, we're over here, we have to do a sudo, remember that, because we're in the opt directory. You can change this if you want. I'm just giving you this example here, and we'll grab that, obviously. There we go. And now we have our crowd. As I said, the same steps, right? So we'll just do crowd. We're going to have to sudo that. Now your replica and your node, your main node, have to have the same key as your cluster, right? Remember that. We'll shut down our node. Okay. Just take a sip of my drink there. Okay, so now all we have to do is just start up our replica. That's pretty much it. We can, if you want, right, you can go inside the sudo nano.corrode config, and you can see, I mean, you can probably even give a replica if you wanted to, you know what I mean? But that's not a use case. That's not something I've done, but you can do that if you want to. You actually can, and it'll work beautifully, right? Just because of how it's designed. Now, for the replica, you can set up for the replica to have backups, but because the synchronization time we set up so little, like every 2 minutes or whatever, like it's fine. We don't have to have this replica backed up because I mean, it's synced with the main node. So we're good there. What we'll do is we'll just start it up under a service, and oh, sorry, let me actually enable logging for the replica here, so we get a logging file. Okay, cool. So now we just followed those same steps that we did here, right? So we're just gonna go and do I like to follow my own documentation. It's kind of funny, but you know, you want to give the right stuff, right? So you follow what you write, you know, and you know, it sounds kind of funny, but it's what you do. It's what I do, at least. So we're making that service, right? Again, in systemd, system, crowd, service. Oh, I forgot the nano. And because this is a replica, I mean, you can call it a replica if you want, CursusDB cluster node replica service. If you want, it doesn't matter, but you can do that. So we'll save that. We'll reload our daemon. We'll start our service. And then we'll enable it as well. Okay. Awesome. So our replica is running, okay? Now all we have to do is go to our node and just start our node. That's it. So there you go. Now here's the fun part, the cluster. Okay, so let's set up the cluster. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so the cluster. It's very similar situation here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go sudo make directory, and we're going to make the directory inside opt CursusDB. We're going to cd inside of there. Okay, and then we're going to get the cluster. So CursusDB cluster. We're going to, we got to sudo that. Sudo, tar it up. And there we go, we have Cursus. So, if you haven't used Cursus, it's very easy. Cursus, I think do we have to sudo this? Yeah, probably. Sudo. So we're going to set up a database user. I'm just going to call it Alex, and I'll just type some password. And so the key, right, is shared between your nodes and your clusters. So make sure it's the same. There you go. You must set up nodes for your CursusDB cluster to read from in your Cursus config. Okay, no problem. Let's do that. Node Cursus config. Nano sudo nano Cursus config. Hey, let's go. Sudo nodes. Let's set this up. So we'll just do a 1, 2, 3, 4 host. And we have our main node, right? So right here, node 0, we'll just copy that out. We'll copy that IP address, which is internal. We'll paste it. And we'll say that this is at port 7681, or sorry, 7682. I'm pretty sure under the, I just want to do a sanity check here that I actually set up that Cursus corrode config file is correct. Yeah, 7682. I just wanted to make sure it's correct before it does any syncs. Okay, perfect. Not that it won't do anything, it just won't sync anything. And you can change it again, right? But as we go through the tutorial, it should be right. Okay, so now what you do is you also do a replicas. Okay, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4 host, and then you get your replica IP address. Okay, and you go like this, and you say port 7682. Okay, so that looks good. Now we're just going to test it before we make a service and do all the TLS stuff, right? So let's start up our Cursus. So as you can see, we got a connect to nodes 225, which is the status code. And we got a node connection established to the main node and the replica. Now let's just close up Cursus. So that's awesome, right? Everybody's following along, I hope, and understanding, and everything is good there. So this looks good. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to add a TLS certificate. Okay. We're going to add a certificate and a FQDN, and we're going to be using SIRPOP. So as you know, the cluster has an external IP address. Okay, so if we grab this external IP address and go over, so I have this random domain here. It's just flimgym.com. I just got it for the tutorial here. But what I'm going to do is create an A-name record and say cluster 0. You can even say Cursus. You're going to say Cursus 0 if you wanted to, right? Because Cursus is the cluster. So you can say Cursus 0, or you can even say CursusDB cluster 0 if you want. If you want to do something pretty short, CursusDB cluster 0. Pop in the IP address. I'll just say every 1 minute, or just the TTL is 1 minute for this tutorial. Okay, so we have our FlimGym here. Awesome. So what we're going to do here is request the certificate for FlimGym. This our fqdn.flimgym. We have a subdomain here, right? So under the documentation on CursusDB, if you go into the documentation and you go to set up TLS with SIRPOP, this is an example, and we're going to follow it. The reason I do this is obviously to show you how to follow the documentation as well, because it's what it's meant for. and I like to use it as well. It's very useful. So first, we're going to start with the first command here and just run it. We're going to run the second command, run it. Now, they might not work depending on your system, but I just run them anyway because it's either which package manager you have. We're going to install this with Snap. It's a recommended way for Serpbot. Okay, so installed. And this is a TLS v1.3, just letting you know. And as you can see, I mentioned here, right, I say that the Serpbot requires ports 80 and 443 to be enabled. And we did that earlier, right? We made sure of that. So perfect. Now, all we have to do is just get our cert. So we'll go here. We'll look at our FQDN here. So I get it completely right. We got CursusDB cluster, CursusDB cluster 0.flimgym.com. That what it is? Let's see. CursusDB cluster 0, CursusDB cluster 0, and flimgym.com. Cool. So let's request that cert. Let's put in like product at CursusDB.com. Sure. And as you can see, we have our two pieces that we have to actually put into our Cursus config here. So we'll copy this here and we will put it somewhere. I don't know where I'm going to put it. I don't know where I'm going to put it, but let me see here. I'm just putting it here just so I can see it. All right, so with that, now we have our certificates ready. What we can do is just go sudo nano.cursusconfig, and we're going to enable TLS for the cluster, and we're going to pop in our cert and our key. So this is our cert right here. I'll paste that in, and this is our key right here, and we'll paste that in. I didn't save anything there if you were wondering, it's just there. Okay, so now we have our TLS cert, TLS key, it's true, perfect. Let's save that, and let's try to start our cluster up with that configuration. As you can see, it started no problem, which is perfect. So now we're going to create that service for the cluster. So all you have to do is go back to the repository and go cluster, and you can follow along with the systemd instructions over here. Right, so all you have to do, just move this up here, we'll follow along with it. There you go, we'll do sudo nano etc systemd system cursus.service. Oh, make sure you do that. We'll copy our cluster service here, save it. We'll do a daemon reload. We'll start up our service. We'll check the status of our service. It's running, perfect. But you know what, I think I actually forgot something here. So we're going to stop our service. We forgot to enable logging, I think, for our cluster, didn't we? Hold on, let's do a sudo nano.cursusconfig. Logging is off, see. Okay. So let's stop our service there for a second, because we do want to have logging for our service for sure. Okay. So down here we have logging. We'll enable logging. You'll see log query now. This is if you want to log the incoming queries, and if you're storing, you know, PII and stuff like that, I wouldn't recommend doing that because then you're gonna have, you know, emails and first names and last names and stuff like that in your logs if you log query. This is just for testing. Okay. Now join responses. If you have many nodes, okay, I would just always recommend to join responses, honestly. Like I always join responses. If you have a need to not, by default, it's not join, just to show you how it kind of works, right? But normally I'd recommend to join them, and I will join them for this example. So we don't see like the IP address of the node. Now this is just as a use case, right? So we'll save that. We have our logging on, we have our join responses, and we'll save that. And then we will start our node. I mean our cluster here, sorry. So we'll start it up. We'll enable it. And there you go. So now, congratulations, you've deployed a CursusDB database in the cloud. It was that easy. It was not hard. Not hard at all, right? So we're gonna contact our cluster through the cluster shell. Now you can get the cluster shell from downloads on CursusDB, right? So right here, the CursusDB shell, cluster shell. I have it installed already, so Curush, I call it Curush, that's what it's called. So what we're gonna do here is write Curush, we're gonna put in host, and we're gonna provide it with our host. So we know that our host is CursusDB cluster 0.flimgym.com, and we know that TLS is true, okay? And then we'll put in our username and our password, and we'll ping our cluster. And there you go. Congratulations, as I said, you have an awesome database, right? So what can we do here? Let's insert into posts with a title of we have deployed a new database, and with a body of yay. Just an example here. Insert into post. Let's expand this up here. Insert. So what we're doing is we're inserting into a post collection, and we're inserting some JSON here, very basic stuff. And we'll insert the post. We'll say select count from posts. Now we have a count of 1. We'll insert another post here. We'll say like title, another post, hello world. Select all from posts where title like, we'll do like a like query, like another. So what we're saying here is select all from posts where the title starts with another. Bob's your uncle. Thank you, and more videos to come. And if you're using CursusDB, I really appreciate it. I truly do. It's been an awesome ride, and we're going strong here. I'm continuously working on development and continuously making it better, not just for myself, but for you all. And you can follow the process on the GitHub, or really just on the website as well, if you want. And you know, every release from this point on, and really past version 2. It was, if we go to releases here, version 2.00 LTR. Now, you know, we haven't had any breaking changes since then. There is no breaking changes since version 2. So, and it really isn't gonna be at all. So, as I said, I appreciate anybody using CursusDB, and it's a pleasure. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.